Do you know that you can be off all of your type 2 diabetic medications in less than 1 month with no special foods, no special supplements, and no exercise? I'm Dr. Steve Hewlett. I've been a doctor of pharmacy for over 35 years, and now I'm helping people get off their diabetic medications, lose weight, and regain the energy through nutrition. I'm also a speaker and an author of the book, Your Plate is Your Fate. So, did you realize that you have 100% control over whether you let your type 2 diabetes progress into multi organ failure and death, or whether you totally reverse it and live a vibrant, high quality life? Now, my overall goal is to prove to the medical community that diabetes is preventable, stoppable, and reversible. All of us in the medical field, we've been brainwashed by the drug companies to think all we can do is get the blood sugar down. And you got to give a pill or give an injection in order to do this. When in fact, that never works. The key is don't get your blood glucose up in the first place. Now, I've already got many people and many of our clients off diabetic drugs in under 30 days. So I know for a fact this is true, but we're still being taught in the medical field that this is not true. I have friends that have just graduated from med school that were taught that they can't prevent or reverse diabetes. And I have nurses, friends who are nurses in nursing school right now they are being taught that diabetes is not reversible and you can't control it. I was taught the exact same thing, so I know what they're being taught. I believed that for about 31 years. But for the last 4 years, I've been doing a lot of research and I found out this is not true at all. So I want you to explain exactly what I'm saying when I say this. So the first thing, the three pillars of disease. When you have these three things, you are starting to cause damage to every single organ in your body. And those three things are having a high blood glucose, having high insulin, and having inflammation throughout your body. When you have all three of those, that is what's killing all the organs in your body. And that is type 2 diabetes. It's the exact same thing. So type 2 diabetes isn't just one thing. Type 2 diabetes, I call it an umbrella disease, because when you have those three things, high blood glucose, high insulin, and inflammation, which is type 2 diabetes, you are killing every organ. So you get fatty liver disease, you get fatty heart, you get fatty kidney going dialysis, fatty brain, you start having Alzheimer's and dementia and everything else. It affects every single organ in your body. So when you reverse diabetes, you reverse a lot of these other conditions also. So you can get off blood pressure medications. I've had people get off their pain medications, their antidepressants, heart medications. It is amazing. When you cure this one thing of type 2 diabetes, you can cure a lot of the organ failure that you've started into, as long as your organ failure hasn't gone too far. But you can eliminate the need for type 2 diabetic medications in less than 1 month. And this is great news for people. Now, remember, this is a very fine point that you need to understand. Yes, you can get off diabetic medications in less than a month, but that does not mean you're reversing type 2 diabetes in less than a month. However, when you keep doing the same thing that you did to get off the medications, you keep on doing that. And depending on your disease state or how much fat you have in your body or how full your fat cells are, then that's going to determine how long it takes for you to get off diabetic or totally reverse your type 2 diabetes. So to understand this, I want you to remember, when you have a high blood glucose, that raises your blood insulin. When you raise your blood insulin, your insulin tells your liver to turn all that glucose into triglycerides. That's a form of fat. Then your insulin levels also tell your fat cells, store all this fat in your fat cells. When you do this over time, like 10, 20, 30 years, when you're continuously stuffing your fat cells, you never allow your body a chance to burn that fat back out of your fat cells. Eventually, that cell, your fat cell, gets totally stuffed and it can't hold any more fat. Now, that cell is called insulin resistant. So there's nothing wrong with the cell, nothing wrong with your insulin, nothing wrong with your pancreas. It's your cell is so full of fat, it can't hold any more. So that one cell becomes insulin resistant. However, you have fat cells all over your body. That's why it takes years and decades to actually cause full-blown diabetes when you have most of your cells are totally full of fat cells. So the question is, why are your fat cells getting so full? And that's the question, because the question isn't how do we get this blood glucose down? The main question you have to ask yourself, and nobody's asking themselves this, is why is your blood glucose going up in the first place? So there are some people out there who, and that's the whole key to this, is you just quit eating glucose. And some people can hear this and they can automatically, they do this all on their own. They don't need anybody's help. So if you just decrease or stop the glucose that you eat, then you will also reverse type 2 diabetes. If you do need help, we are here because glucose comes from carbohydrates. There are God made carbohydrates and there's laboratory made carbohydrates. God made carbohydrates are your fruits and vegetables. All your plant based foods contain carbohydrates. A carbohydrate and glucose is the exact same thing. If you have 50 grams of carbs, you have 50 grams of glucose. Does that make sense? So, anytime you're looking at an ingredient label, you don't even have to look at how much sugar is in there. Just look at how many carbs are in there because that's glucose. That's how much glucose is in there. So there's God-made carbohydrates like fruits and vegetables, and there's also laboratory-made, chemical-based foods that you get in the box, bottle, bang, can that man makes, and those are loaded with glucose. So those by far are the ones you need to stay away from. So if you just do those things, stay away from all man-made products because they're toxic in every way. They only contain glucose, fructose, chemicals, and seed oils. All of those are toxic to your body. And also watch the amount of fruit and vegetables that you eat also, because depending on your disease state and how far along you are in it, those also contain glucose. The ones that grow above the ground have less glucose. The ones that grow below the ground that has starch in it, which is the storage form of glucose for the plants. Starch is just long chains of glucose. Flour is just powdered glucose. So if you can stay away from those on your own, then that's great. Go for it. I know people who have done that and they've gotten off all their diabetic medications. However, if you do need help and you want to get a clear plan on just exactly how you can actually decrease the amount of blood sugar, blood glucose that goes into your body, and you have a more confident conversation with your doctor about diabetes, all you have to do is click the link below and you'll get a free minute wellness solutions chat. And this is where you'll talk one-on-one with me, and we can let you know of all the different programs that we have to help people get off their type 2 diabetic medications and reverse their type 2 diabetes. So first thing I want to make sure you can reverse type 2 diabetes. Okay. Now I'm actually talking about type 2 diabetes, but this is the deal. Remember, one fat cell who gets totally stuffed is called insulin resistant, but that doesn't mean you reverse your type 2 diabetes. But when you continue to eat the same kinds of stuff that everybody eats all the time, and they do this because of our old dietary guidelines from 1977, that was pure marketing. It had nothing to do with health. And since we started eating all those breads and flours and grains and carbohydrates, that food pyramid told us that is killing us and that is killing the world, because we're still telling everybody that this is what you should be eating. Fat makes you fat and cholesterol is bad. It is not fat that makes you fat. It's glucose that makes you fat. So when you have one cell that's insulin resistant, and then you start, which means it's totally full of fat, can't hold any more. And all of a sudden you start filling up all your fat cells around your body. Now what you start doing is it starts taking more and more insulin to get rid of the glucose that you're eating. So that is pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes is not an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4. That's a marketing technique to try to get more people on diabetic medications, because diabetic medications makes diabetes worse. Because what happens is when you fill up all your fat cells and it takes all this insulin, every time you eat glucose, your insulin levels rise. When you have high levels of fasting insulin, because it's trying to put all this extra glucose that you're eating, turn it into fat and put it in all on your fat cells, it takes more and more insulin to try to get that to be done, try to stuff even more fat in those fat cells. So when you have high insulin and normal glucose levels, that is prediabetes. So that is, if you go into the doctor and you have a high insulin and a regular glucose, your doctor does not check insulin. Chances are they don't even check your fasting insulin, because all we were taught from the drug companies is that diabetes is a problem of high blood glucose. And remember, high blood glucose is only a symptom. Type 2 diabetes is called insulin resistance, which means you've had too high insulin for too long. And diabetic medications work by stimulating your pancreas to produce more insulin or make your cells more sensitive to insulin. In both cases, it's making the insulin resistance worse, which means it's making diabetes worse. And they're taking your eye off the ball by having you focus on the blood glucose. So the key is how much insulin is in your body that your body's having to secrete to keep that glucose low. So pre-diabetes means high insulin, regular glucose. This goes on for decades, 2, 3 decades before you ever see the rise in glucose. But if you go into your doctor's office and all they check is glucose, they're going to say, oh, you're fine, because they don't check that insulin level. However, all of a sudden, you're going to have so many of your fat cells so full you can't hold any more triglycerides, which is what glucose gets turned into. And all of a sudden, now your glucose starts to rise. And that's when you go to the doctor. And that is when he comes up and says, oh, you have prediabetes or you have diabetes. That you're way behind the game if that's what you're waiting for. So don't do that. And again, you can check your own fasting insulin level. You do not need your doctor to do this. Go on ownyourlabs.com and just click that you want a fasting insulin level. It's only about $15. You'll get a little printout that you can take to a blood draw place like LabCorp or Quest, and they'll take that paper. They won't charge you any more money. And then you can get your blood drawn and you'll have your fasting insulin levels back within a week. Now, the key to this is if you look at the range on that fasting insulin on that lab report, it's going to say that you're fine as long as your fasting insulin is below 20. That is not true. They do that because that range is based off sick people who are carbohydrate addicted and glucose toxic, which is what most pre-diabetic and diabetic patients are. What you really want is your fasting insulin to be less than 5. And really, you'd like to have that less than 3 if you can, but you want it at least less than 5. So anyway, you don't need your doctor to get an insulin level, but I highly recommend that you do it. Okay. Because what happens now, the key is, okay, so that's insulin resistance. That's diabetes. When you have so many of your cells totally full of fat, you can't hold anymore. So now your glucose starts to rise. Now, you do not want a high blood glucose. That is true. High blood glucose does all kinds of bad things. Glucose attaches to every protein in your body and damages it. And our whole bodies are built of protein. Anything you can touch, your bones, your skin, your muscles, your organs, a lot of your hormones like insulin. A lot of these are proteins and your red blood cells. That's where the A1C comes from. The A1C is from the hemoglobin on your red blood cell, which is a protein, and glucose is attaching that and damaging it. So that's what they're doing. They're testing how many damaged red blood cells do you have, because that's going to equate to the average blood glucose for the last 3 months. I just want you to understand that this is all focusing just on glucose, but you do not want high glucose. So if you are eating glucose constantly, you are going to have to do something to get that glucose down. And everybody has their ways of how to get that glucose down. You can give medications, which makes diabetes worse. You can give herbal supplements, which makes diabetes worse. You can exercise. That doesn't make diabetes worse, but it's not going to get anywhere near enough for you to be able to get your glucose levels down, because even with heavy exercise, you aren't burning anywhere near the amount of glucose that you tend to take in one day. So the key is you do not want a high blood glucose. So if you keep eating glucose, eating carbohydrates, eating all this glucose and fructose and lab-made food and fruits and vegetables, if you keep doing that, you're going to have to come up with something else that's going to lower your blood glucose. And I guarantee you will not find it, because the only thing you can do is keep the glucose from going high in the first place. Now, there's several different ways that people do this. There's 3 main ways that people try to lower the glucose. One, they go on these starvation diets, these juice diets, or taking GLP-1 medications, which are horrible. And they also make diabetes worse, because what they do is they just make it to where you don't eat. So if you don't eat glucose, yes, if you don't eat glucose, it is going to burn the fat out of your fat cells, and that will make you lose weight. That's true. But if you're not eating, you're also not eating protein. And so your body needs protein. So it's going to take the protein away from your muscles in order to preserve its vital organs. So you're muscle wasting. It's called auto cannibalism. You're forcing your body to eat itself from the inside out. That's why most of these people that go on these diets, they look so gaunt. They've lost all the muscle. They've lost their butt. They've lost the muscle in their face. They're losing muscle all over the place. And then some of these people, that's over half of the weight that they see loss is muscle loss. And you do not want to waste. You do not want to lose your muscle. That's very important. Medication, I just talked about it. That's another way. Medication, starvation diets can work for a little while. You can white knuckle it all you want and quit eating all these glucose. But if that's all you're doing is starvation diets and taking these medications, eventually you're going to get sick and you're going to need to start eating again. And once you do, since you never trained your brain, you never trained your thoughts to realize what was causing obesity in the first place, your weight's going to come right back up. And when it does, it's going to go even higher than it was. And that's what we're seeing with all these people who do these GLP-1s and all these crazy diets where you just don't eat food. So that's one thing. Starvation will work for a little bit. If you think you're going to lower your blood glucose and your insulin with medication, you are totally wrong. Medication is the worst way you can get your blood glucose down, again, because it causes more diabetes because it works on raising your insulin levels or making your cells more sensitive to insulin. The only way that you can lower your glucose and lower your insulin, keep both glucose and insulin low, is by the type of food that you eat. It's your nutrition. You have to be aware that glucose raises your, when you eat glucose, when you eat carbohydrates, when you eat man-made food also, when you eat this stuff, glucose goes in your blood and your insulin levels rise. Okay. So what you want to do is quit eating glucose, and that keeps your insulin level low, because glucose makes your insulin levels go very high. And depending on what kind, they can go very high very quickly. And even if you have a low glycemic vegetable, that doesn't really mean anything. Yes, you are not raising your glucose as quickly. Yes, you are not raising your insulin as high. But does that make any difference? No, because whether it goes in high, goes in fast, or goes in slow, still all the glucose that you're eating is getting into your body, and your body is turning all that glucose straight into triglycerides and storing that as fat. So don't be fooled by the scheme of high glycemic or low glycemic foods. It has nothing to do with that. It has quit eating them in the first place. Because like I said, glucose, when you eat glucose, makes your insulin levels rise. When you eat protein, it goes up just a little bit. And when you eat fat, it doesn't affect your insulin levels at all. So saying that fat causes fat is the most idiotic thing that I've ever heard. And I was taught this. I knew for 31 years, that's what I thought. Now I'm smarter. Now I know. Now I've learned on my own. And there's a lot of people out here that know the same thing. My job is to take all their information and translate it to you so you understand. So you eat glucose, your insulin levels rise. When your insulin levels rise, it tells your liver to turn all that glucose into fat in the form of triglycerides. Then that insulin tells your fat cells store all these triglycerides in your fat cells. When one cell becomes insulin resistant, or a few cells, that's pre-diabetes, when it takes more insulin and high insulin and keep your glucose levels. That's individual cell resistance. And the more cells that you get insulin resistant, this becomes full-blown diabetes. Okay. So you have 100% control over whether you let your type 2 diabetes progress into multi-organ failure and death. Because if you don't take care of what you eat, that's exactly what diabetes does. It starts killing every single organ in your body. That's why people have amputations. That's why they go on dialysis. That's why they have fatty liver disease. That's why they have cardiovascular heart attacks and cardiovascular disease. That's why they have Alzheimer's and dementia. Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes. So if you let this run, it is not one little thing. You are actually saying that you want every single cell in your body to be damaged and killed. And when you kill enough organ cells, you're going to end up killing the organ, and then that's going to end up killing you. And there are so many people who die of type 2 diabetes because they don't understand this one thing, that you have 100% control. So if you can control what you eat, you can also control the quality of your life. You can either have multi-organ failure and death and being in and out of the hospital and in and out of the doctors and put more and more medications, or you can totally reverse type 2 diabetes and live a vibrant, high quality life. So that's why if you quit eating glucose, your blood glucose will not go up. And if your blood glucose is not going up, then you don't have need for type 2 diabetic medications. And that's why I can blatantly, boldly say that you can be off all your type 2 diabetic medications in 30 days. Okay, in 1 month, if you quit eating glucose, your glucose is not going to go up, your insulin is not going to go up, and you're going to be using your fat for your energy source. And that's the key, because high insulin causes you to store fat, low insulin causes you to burn fat. So when you keep glucose out of your mouth, you keep your insulin levels low, and you're actually burning the fat out of your fat cells for your energy source. That's how you lose weight. That's how you reverse type 2 diabetes. you have to remember to keep the glucose out. How much glucose you eat, that is totally dependent on what your health status is right now. If you're already on type 2 diabetic medications for 1 month, I would say keep them all out. I would go to almost an all animal based foods. And that just doesn't mean meat. That means meat, milk, cheese, eggs, anything that comes from milk. Those are all good. Those are all going to have fat and protein and vitamins and minerals, and they're all going to have low carbohydrates. They're going to keep your insulin levels low, and that's going to allow you to burn the fat for your energy source instead of glucose. And that is the key to all this. So, once again, there's some of you who can take what I just said and what I've talked about in the majority of my podcast and do this all on your own. And my hopes is that you can, that you do. And I've had people that I've just told exactly what I've told you. They got it. The light went off in their head. They said, I'm going to do it. And I have so many testimonials. I have one man that's lost 145 pounds in less than 1 year. He got off all he had atrial tachycardia. He had high blood pressure. He's off all those. I had a physician friend of mine that had been on type 2 diabetic medications for 17 years, including insulin and GLP-1s and 2 other diabetic medications. He listened to what I said. He contacted me about 3 weeks later after he heard me speak at a conference. And when he did, he told me that he is totally off all his meds. After 3 weeks, he went into his doctor, and his doctor, he had never seen this guy's blood glucose that low. And it wasn't low. It was normal, because that's the other thing. You do not have to worry about having a low blood glucose if you don't eat glucose all the time. When you eat glucose all the time, like almost everybody does, you keep your insulin levels high, and you're forcing your body to try to calculate exactly how much insulin produce. And sometimes it overproduces the insulin, and that makes your glucose levels go low. Or if somebody starts eating healthy, and as you eat healthy and you quit eating all this glucose, you're going to naturally keep your blood glucose low. However, if you're on diabetic medications that makes your body produce more insulin or makes your cells more sensitive to insulin, that's going to push your glucose even lower. And then you're going to get hypoglycemic, low blood sugar, and that's going to do the same thing. It's going to make you tired, it's going to make you dizzy, make you hangry, everything. So that's why you do not decrease your blood glucose medications on your own. Let your physician know that you are going to try to reverse your diabetes by nutrition, so he can monitor your medications so they can start weaning those medications down so you don't get in trouble. But again, you can wean these down very quickly when you just stop putting glucose into your mouth. So this is the key. So like I said, you can do this on your own. You can stop eating everything in a box, bottle, bag, can, all this man-made toxic food that is killing all of us. Because again, all the stuff in box, bottle, bag, and can, it is made to increase the revenue for the company. That's what food companies do. They never said that they cared about your health. They care about their shareholders. They want to increase their money. So the more they can keep you hungry, the more they can keep you addicted, the more they can keep you buying their stuff because, oh, it's so cheap and it tastes so good and it's so available everywhere. And all the other things that are part of the 5 A's of addiction, that's what they care about. And that's why they put glucose, fructose, seed oils, and chemicals in all their stuff to keep you addicted, keep you eating their stuff. It has nothing to do with health. In fact, what it does have to do with health is this is what's making everybody absolutely sick, diseased, and dying. So if you can do it on your own, that's great. If you can't and you want our help, please just click the link below and you'll get a free one-on-one 30-minute conversation with me. My mission, my goal is to get as many people off their diabetic medications, reverse their type 2 diabetes, and prove to the medical community this can be done. So the more people that I can get off their diabetic medications and reverse their diabetes, the more you can go out to your physician, and that is going to be what makes your physician get wide-eyed and think, what are you doing? How are you doing this? So you will be teaching your physician, not the other way around. So you've got to teach your physician, and the only way to do that is to keep the glucose out of your mouth. I guarantee everybody that I've done this with, the first things that I always hear them say, one, they said they have so much more clarity of thought. Almost 100% of the patients that I've gotten, clients that I've gotten all of this, says that they have more clarity of thought. They have way more energy than they ever did. And yes, they lose weight. Losing weight is just a positive side effect. Okay. That's just a positive side effect of eating fat for your energy source, using your own fat for your energy source. So, without a doubt, you can lose weight. When you see someone who's obese, or if you're obese, look on the inside. That's what I do. If they have that much fat on the outside, I know that all their organs on the inside have a lot of fat also. And that means that you are pre diabetic. If you haven't been diagnosed with diabetes yet, you definitely are pre diabetes. If your waist right around the level of your belly button, say you're 5'8", so you're 68 inches tall. Half of 68 is 34 inches. So if you are 5'8", if you're 68 inches tall and you measure around your waist and it's higher than 34 inches, then you're diabetic, okay? Or pre-diabetic, you are on your way. So your waist circumference should be less than half of your height. If you need help looking at this, click the link below. We'll tell you what we have. And I truly want to get you off your diabetic medications, reverse your type 2 diabetes, change the quality of your life so you can live a longer, vibrant, and a more healthy, high quality life. That's my goal. So that's my podcast for today. I hope you understand there's a difference between getting off your diabetic medications in 30 days and how long it's going to take to actually reverse your type 2 diabetes. But you do it all by the same thing. You just have to continue it for a little bit longer. And you'll know what that is because your fat's going to come off, your weight's going to go down, your energy is going to come up, your clarity of thought's going to come up, and you'll be off many other medications like blood pressure medications. Click the link below. I'd love to work with you. And until next time, stay nourished and stay well.